Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm your host, Sam Chase, and with us this evening is Rodney Elliott, who is a candidate for the state legislature from the newly drawn 16th Middlesex district. Now, for the benefit of our viewers, the 16th Middlesex, for Chelmsford viewers anyway, encompasses precincts 1, 2, 3A, 5B, and we'll get into that discussion, and 6. So if you take 3A and 5B and add them together and consider that is roughly one precinct, then you have the equivalent of 4 precincts that you're representing in Chelmsford. And the bulk of the district, of course, is Lowell, the Centralville area. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but before we get into the discussion, Rodney, as we do with all of our guests, if you could just give us a brief snapshot, a little biographical snapshot, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Selectman, for having me here today.
Wow.
Well, Mr. Selectman always...
You're going back a few years, right?
Thank you for having me today and giving me an opportunity to speak to the people of Chelmsford and perhaps Lowell, if it makes it to Lowell. But yeah, my name's Rodney Elliott. I was a member of the Lowell City Council for 24 years. I served a term as mayor. I was born in Pawtuckettville. I went to Catholic school, St. John Duck School. As a youngster, I have 2 daughters. I raised both of them in the Pawtuckettville neighborhood. We built a house right down the street from where I was raised. So 2 girls. I have 3 granddaughters, and they keep us busy. But it's been an honor and a privilege to serve as a member of the Lowell City Council for 24 years. And as mayor as well. Lowell is, it's an incredible city, and you really get an opportunity as the mayor to go into every neighborhood and to be invited, and we're invited to most flag raisings and events, but as the mayor you really get an opportunity to get a deep insight into the community, and it's a wonderful city. I met so many wonderful people at that time. But moving on, I've in addition to be a city councilor, which is a part-time job, but as you know, Mr. Selectman, it's not a part-time job. It's busy. I volunteered to coach and sit on nonprofit organizations where I continue to provide some support with the Lowell Boys and Girls Club. I just recently was appointed to the Lowell Housing Authority as a commissioner. It's a non-paying position, and it is important, as they say, to give back and to give of your time. Being an elected official is one thing, however, contributing in other ways, coaching in the communities, and I've sat on hospital boards, et cetera. So I do feel that's an interesting, an important aspect, and you try to teach your children to volunteer and get involved. That's what makes communities. Professionally, I mean, this is a part-time. I've worked 42 years in various capacities, local, state, and federal government. I spent 25 years at the Environmental Protection Agency, where I was a budget analyst. I was a congressional liaison. I did contract work at our lab right here in Chelmsford, so I was fortunate to be able to expand into various opportunities. I was also a city planner for the city of Lowell for a number of years before moving on to the town of Groton as the administrative assistant to the Board of Selectmen. And currently, I work for DEP for 2 years, and I really enjoyed the job as the Brownsfield director. The commute was a little bit much. It was right on Winter Street in Boston, so I took a job a little bit closer to the commuter rail, and I work for the Department of Conservation as a capital budget director and now as parks operations. So the bulk of my career clearly has been spent at environmental agencies. I think it's important. It's an important aspect, and it's important to me, to do that. So that's a little bit about myself and my background and why I'm running. I believe my service as a Lowell City Councilor has prepared me significantly for this job. And I'm filling some big shoes, if I'm fortunate enough to win, of current city manager and former state representative Tom Golden, who served, I believe, 27 years in this seat admirably.
It's hard for me to believe it's been that long, but it has been. You're right.
Yes. And he had moved up in leadership and served on various committees. and certainly was a steward of resources, state resources to bring back home. But I'll talk about a little bit more about that as we talk.
Well, you certainly you do bring a very interesting background for this particular position that you're trying to achieve in the state legislature now. I mean, I think one of the problems that I have with some of our state politicians is many of them are one-dimensional. They've only done one thing in their lives, and maybe all they've ever done is work in local political government. So they don't really have a very well-rounded perspective on what the average person has to do just to get through the day. But your background is I think, lends some credibility to, your understanding of how people have to live every day just to paycheck to paycheck or whatever it is just to get by. And I do know, because I follow the Lowell political situation, and by the way, I love the city of Lowell. I mean, I live in Chelmsford, but I have to tell you, I would, if it made sense for me to do it, I would live in Lowell in a heartbeat.
Oh,
it's one of the, I think it's one of the better small cities in the country, actually, and very well managed and has been for a number of years. You were considered the financial guru, I think, on the city council, given your background that you've just given us, I mean, certainly we understand why now, because that's been your training and your experience. So,
right.
And I think that's something that should interest the voters of your district. So,
yeah, I think that's a good point. If I could,
go ahead.
Yeah, I served on the finance subcommittee my entire tenure on the Lowell City Council. Certainly using my background, I have a bachelor's and master's in public administration, which certainly I used to my advantage for the benefit of the city, and I'll continue to do that at the state level. I think there's great opportunity for someone to look at, while it's a $47 billion budget, there's always areas to look at where, working in concert with the state auditor, where is their waste, where is their fraud, where can we do better, where are there more efficiencies. And I did that on the Lowell City Council. When I got on in '97, the city was financially struggling. We were under the Financial Control Board of the Department of Revenue, and lo and behold, 24 years later, and it's a team effort. I think it's an attest to city managers and city councilors who, work together. I'd like to think that I played some role, being a steward of the finance subcommittee, to put Lowell in a very healthy financial position, both from a bond rating, and as you know, Mr. Selectman, the better the bond rating, the more you save taxpayers when it comes to borrowing and investing in capital projects. So I do feel that is a benefit that I can bring to this position as well. Yeah.
Well, I certainly hope so, because I think the way most people feel now is that people in political office somehow are insulated from the economic realities. Now, certainly if you're in the state legislature, you're not going to get rich. I mean, you're not going to starve either, but you're not going to get rich. Given your background and your financial expertise and so forth, it sounds like if you do get the position, that's one of the things you're going to concentrate on. You're going to try to look out for the taxpayer, the person who pays the bills. Okay, so that's good news. Do you have anything specific at this point before before you take the office? Do you have anything specific in mind that you think you might like to concentrate on when you do get elected?
Sure. Look, I'm from a working class background. Both of my grandparents literally worked in the mills in Lowell, hub hosiery. My grandfather, he was a shoe cutter for in excess of 50 years. They were hardworking people. My grandfather's on my father's side, a truck driver. My mother raised 5 children, and we had those times when my father worked 2 jobs. We had to make ends meet somehow, including myself. I mean, I worked myself through college, and continue to work 2 jobs throughout my career to make ends meet. And so I do understand. My folks ran a small business for about 17 years, so I understood what it meant, paycheck to paycheck, or running a small business. And I hope to bring that understanding and experience. But I do think one of the first things I would do would be, the legislature acted on many bills just recently, and one of them they did not act on was to provide tax relief to property owners. And I think that's imperative. I do hear, I've been knocking on doors since April, both in Chelmsford and in Pawtuckettville and Centerville and Westlands, and people are concerned. Inflation is hitting
Yes.
everybody, and I do think that tax relief is necessary. I think it's important, and that would be a priority right off the bat when it comes to the economic realities of people living day to day. We look at food shortages and food banks and the lines. People, there's more of a demand for food. I read just yesterday there's a large proportion of the population that are skipping meals because of the inflationary
Yes.
effect on that. So,
And it isn't just what we might say are the poorer areas of the state either. I mean, you have that situation in Chelmsford. You have it in Littleton. You even have some of it in Westford. Okay, so it is everywhere. People are hurting.
I agree. No, I think it's affecting, as you mentioned, not just the low-income people. It's the middle income, it's the working families, and I applaud the administration for supporting certainly the food banks and providing additional resources. Free lunches to kids that go to school. We don't realize until you go visit schools, and as the mayor, I certainly did take opportunity. People coming, I can say in Lowell anyway, kids coming to school with no coats. And we've supported a coat drive program. I certainly have involved with Lowell Youth Soccer. We did it, and as well as their other. So, kids coming to school with no coats. And certainly, if we don't provide lunches and meals to these kids, they're going to go without. So they're real needs.
Absolutely right. You touched just tangentially on something that's very interesting to me as a political observer. Obviously, I think anybody who's paying any attention these days understands that the country has become more and more polarized in terms of political views. So you have the extreme left, you have the extreme right, and then you've got everything in between. So you're a Democrat. And in this part of the state, it seems like the progressives or the more left aspect of the Democratic Party has taken hold. Where would you put yourself on that spectrum? And that's the first part of the question. And the second part is, should you be elected? Obviously, the Democrats have the supermajority, but you will be working with some Republicans, and there are some people in the legislature whom I would characterize as conservative Democrats, if there is such a thing. So how would you bridge those gaps?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about terms and quite frankly, you're on the campaign trail, and I have been every day. Certainly there are labels. I would hope that, this should be issue-driven. I would say that I am a moderate Democrat, if you will. I do believe, and I sit on these nonprofit organizations and for quite some time community teamwork and so many others, because there are real life needs of people. I would say that I'm a moderate. I believe that you have to work with both sides, and not to coin that term, both sides, to come up with solutions, real solutions, rather than just the divisiveness and not getting anything accomplished. So I hope that answers,
It does, and I think, the short answer that I would say is if you're in the legislature and a Republican comes up with a good idea, you're just simply not going to dismiss it because the guy has the R after it.
I don't think that's in the best interest, Mr. Selectman, for the people that are going to elect us. We make commitments. We bring forward a platform or issues, and how are we going to accomplish that? And I will say, as 24-year member of the Lowell City Council, number one, I'm not a career politician. I've worked full-time, but I do have a sincere interest and passion in government because of what I can bring. But you've got to compromise if you want to accomplish for the benefit of the city. I feel Lowell has made great progress in the last 24 years, and I've been just a part of that. And that means not always agreeing on every aspect of every initiative or every project or every policy, but bringing consensus, bringing compromise, for the good of the city. And there are many instances, and I'm not sure whether it would be zoning or tax increment financing or any number of issues on the local level, but it's important to keep the big picture, as they say, to advance the goals of the city and the people that live there.
Mm-hmm. Good answer. And so now we get back to the fact that we have, if you will, for lack of a better term, split allegiance the way your district is drawn. And I have to, Jack, I wish I had a better picture, but if you can zoom in on this thing, and if you look at it, on the right-hand side is the newly drawn district, the 16th Middlesex. This one here was the old one. It doesn't look like there's that much difference. But look at the way that thing is drawn. I mean, that is really interesting. And just, this is the 14th Middlesex. Now, it's long, but there's some symmetry to that, okay? You can look at that and you can say, well, okay, I make some sense. How do you make sense out of a district that's drawn like this? Which leads me to the conclusion that when these legislative districts are drawn, they're probably drawn to protect the incumbent. Is that a fair statement?
I'm not sure.
I'm not trying to get you into trouble here with the city
I'm
manager,
not sure what the logic.
but,
I'm not sure what the logic was in drawing these. I know there are some when we redistrict in Lowell for the new system just last year, where we divided the city into 8 electoral districts, city council districts, and then we went the second level, and then we created districts for school committees, and it is complicated.
It was very confusing. I tried to follow that whole thing, but understanding that you were under court order.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
that's correct. And I always thought there should be neighborhood representation.
I think it's a much better system.
Lowell is 13.4 square miles, but when you run, it's important, and it's difficult unless you have wide name recognition to be elected. So I do believe, and there were some neighborhoods historically that would never get representation, in particular Centerville and South Lowell. But to answer your question, when I decided to run, certainly learning the configuration of this district, and many residents, similar to Lowell, we went through different name changes, the ward changes, the voting locations changes, and we need to make it as easy and less complicated as we can. To this day, Mr. Selectman, I can tell you, knocking on doors, and I'll knock right until September 6th, people are very confused. Where do I vote, and what precinct and district am I in? So, long story is, I do not know how those changed, and quite frankly, I know it just recently changed where there were some precincts that were shifted yet once again. From Representative Howard had some parts of Chelmsford and that has changed again. So,
well, we went from having 4 state reps down to 3.
Right.
So they chopped up the districts, and like I said, in the 14th Middlesex, it does tend to make some sense the way they've grouped it.
And what I've been telling voters, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What I've been telling voters, and their concern is, Chelmsford used to have 1 representative.
Yes.
And I understand.
22 years ago.
Yes, 22 years ago, yeah. Representative
Carol Clevin.
Right. And it is unfortunate that it's been dissected. However, short of that, similar to being a city councilor in Lowell, we have to, I was committed to every neighborhood, small and large, the acre. And again, and I do think that's an important aspect of my candidacy, that if I am elected as your state representative, Chelmsford will have a voice, a strong voice, because it's the district and they need representation. And I hope to collaborate with those other, work together with other, members of the legislature that have a piece of Chelmsford, and be that voice, whether it comes to, school funding or transportation issues. You can't just have a single vote and a single voice, in my opinion, when it comes to major issues, especially at the State House.
Now that's good, and one of the things that I tell people, and of course the complaint you hear all the time as well, if you have these 3 reps, or we used to have 4, their attention is divided, and obviously going to pay more attention to the main part of their constituency, which in your case is Lowell, Jimmy Arcero, it's Westford and Littleton, and so on and so forth. But there's also a counter-argument. When you have an issue before the legislature that is strictly a Chelmsford issue, we got 3 reps.
True.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, not that that happens a lot, but it does happen, and it's happened, since I've been in politics. So you actually have three voices at that point. So that's a little bit of an offset to those people who are upset that we have the so-called divided allegiance. You just touched on something that really is a sore spot with Chelmsford, certainly the town officials and many residents who are aware of the situations, the Chapter 70 funding. And you, being a finance guy, I'm sure you're very well aware of the situation in the background and so forth. The formula is old. I think it needs to be reformed. And the way it is now, we have a situation where a community which is more affluent than Chelmsford, and I'm going to say Westford because that's the community, and the two measures are income, personal income, and then real estate valuation. So that's how they determine, the value of your community for Chapter 70 purposes. Well, in both measures, Chelmsford is a richer town. A building lot acre in Westford is worth more than a building lot acre in Chelmsford. And the average per capita income is significantly higher in Westford than it is in Chelmsford. Yet, they get $5.5 million more in Chapter 70 money. So how do we fix that?
Mr. Selectman, I've heard that loud and clear from yourself as well, and it is an issue of equity. It's an issue of fairness and reviewing and changing the foundation formula so that there is more balance. Communities, Lowell and Chelmsford, affordability and property taxes, we do as best as we can in Lowell to shift that burden.
175, you go to the max.
175, we go to the max.
Every year you go to the max.
To the detriment of sometimes, I think, companies coming to Lowell.
No.
And we try to offset that with any other state incentives or local incentives, particularly the TIFs that I mentioned. However, the burden of property taxes on the residential homeowner with all the services that are necessary and important it's become unaffordable. I can tell you in Lowell, in my experiences, certainly folks on fixed income, they don't want to take out reverse mortgages.
Nope.
So, some tools.
Tom Selleck's a good guy, but you know what?
Yeah.
You're right. It's
Right.
a tough sell.
No, that's not
Right.
the culture. They paid for their house. They don't want to take a mortgage out. They don't want that liability. But they should be able to stay in their house, and it should be affordable.
Exactly.
And we increased as much as we could elderly and veteran abatements and exemptions eligible. And the state should do more. And I do recall that that there was a measure. I think this would be an important aspect if I was a state legislature to provide property tax relief and increase that as much as we can, because I've heard it from many folks in Chelmsford and Lowell. I can't afford my house anymore. I can tell you in Lowell, as part of one of the issues I'm running in, there was a $38 million cost overrun for the new high school. The residents of the city of Lowell cannot afford that. It's the school building authority. We need to, the squeaky wheel gets
Well, you're
the
limited to
grease.
what, 50% reimbursement?
Reimbursement. When this project started out, it was about 79.8%, and through the additions, if there are any add-ons, that reduces.
Right.
I mean, we're talking basic things, Mr. Selectman, like we can't build a new high school with a new gymnasium without an indoor track. That was not an eligible expense for a city like Lowell. It was kind of important. So, as well as I'm aware that in the town of Chelmsford need a new middle school, bearing that cost when I think the state coffers are flush, particularly not only with ARPA money, but that also needs to be changed, in my opinion, because communities, they need new schools, they need capital investment, but it can't be on the property tax owner, it can't be on the residential taxpayer. It's too much of a burden with user fees, with trash, with water, with sewer. And I'm sure we'll get into sewer at another point. But
As you know, the property tax is what they refer to as a regressive tax, because it does not take into consideration a person's ability to pay it. Just because you may be in a $700,000 home doesn't mean you've got big income.
Right.
Okay? We all understand that. I think when Proposition 2.5 was passed 40-some years ago, I think the state told us, well, we're going to be part of the deal, so we're going to make up differences, and we're going to, lottery money is going to go to the cities and towns, we're going to do highway, and that has all kind of fallen by the wayside. The state has reneged on an awful lot of the commitments that they made back in the 1979, 1980 era. So I would like to see any person getting into the legislature, I'd like to see, a fresh look at that. What can we do? And you just articulated it, I think, very well. What can we do to make the state a better partner to the cities and towns? Because after all, our system in Massachusetts is unique. We have 351 little kingdoms all doing the same thing, okay? Right. We don't do it this way in other parts of the country. And really the communities, the municipalities are the creatures of the state legislature. I found that out when I had my first gig as on the finance committee. I thought the town had an awful lot more ability to manage its own destiny. No, the state has to sign off and buy off on just about everything. And it's quite an education when you find that out. So very important. Sure. So anyway, housing, very quickly, because I want to give you some time at the end of the show to talk to the voter and ask for the vote. So housing. We have a housing crisis, according to Attorney General Maura Healey. So what do we do about that?
Yeah, so I'm a member, as I mentioned, I just joined the member of the Lowell Housing Authority, and affordable housing is, it's been important in the city, and we have done, I think, we've made great strides. We have clearly exceeded our 10% threshold as required under 40B, and we continue to do projects in Lowell. Certainly the homelessness and the mental illness that has contributed to homelessness plays into that. I think affordable housing, particularly the cost of rental housing in Lowell. Just at that last meeting last month of the Lowell Housing Authority, we realized that we're trying to increase the threshold of even Section 8 vouchers that we get funding from the federal government. Because a one-bedroom, a two-bedroom was anywhere between $1,600 and $2,000 a month. Working class families cannot afford that. And this is in publicly subsidized housing. There is a need. We've approved projects in the New Hamilton Canal District that has a mix of market rate and workforce and affordable housing. We need to sustain the downtown. However, we need to continue to work towards affordable housing. Affordable housing, based upon the valuation prices and the cost of homes that are being sold. The next generation, it's become unaffordable. So the solution, I can tell you in Lowell, we continue to look for projects. We just approved a 32-unit development on Merrimack Street, all affordable and workforce housing. So it's complicated, but there's no easy solution.
But you will focus your efforts on that, and we're almost we've got about a minute and a half. I want to give you that time to look into the camera and ask Chelmsford residents for the vote. Very important. Go ahead.
Thank you for having me again, Ms. Selectman, and to the voters of Chelmsford. My name's Rodney Elliott. I'm running for the 16th Middlesex District, which includes sections of Chelmsford, Westlands through North Chelmsford. I have been in your community, knocking on your doors since April. I think that's the best way to understand your concerns, your issues. I've done it for 24 years as a member of Lowell City Council. No issue is too small or too large. I am accessible. I have returned every phone call, every email, every text in the last 24 years because I believe constituent service and getting back to people, those people that vote for you, is the most important aspect. I'm going to go to Beacon Hill on day one. There's no on-the-job training for me. I've spent my career in local and state and federal government. I understand the intricacies of state government, and we need someone. I'll be your state representative that's going to go to Beacon Hill to be Chelmsford Voice, to bring the resources, to bring the funding for the various projects, infrastructure, services that we need, that this community and sections of Pawtuckaville and Centerville and Lowell need. So I thank you for the opportunity. I hope to earn your vote, and I appreciate your consideration on September 6th.
RodneyElliott.com is how you get in touch with Councilor Elliott, and we wish you all good luck in this upcoming primary. I'm sure you'll do very, very well, and we look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you very much.